I have the honor of introducing to you all our Attorney General. Our Attorney General, yes. So I'll just, this bio is online, but I will go ahead and just share. Rob Bonta was sworn in as our 34th Attorney General of the state of California in 2021, in April of 2021. He is the first person of Filipino descent and second Asian American to be in the position. He has really been influenced in terms of his focus on justice and fairness from his parents. And he has, his parents actually talk about modeling from the last panel, have been on the front lines of a lot of social justice movements. So raise your kids with that in mind. He decided to become a lawyer to really help right historic wrongs and fight for people who've been harmed. He went to Yale, worked his way through Yale, and he's been leading the statewide fight on a lot of the things that we've been talking about today, the intersection between racial, economic, and environmental justice for communities who are most vulnerable, our immigrant families, renters, working Californians. He's local, right? He's been the deputy city attorney for the city and county of San Francisco. He's held elected office in Alameda County and was later elected an assembly member representing Oakland, Alameda, and San Leandro. So he is someone who is the people's attorney. He is someone who is really focused on seeking accountability from those who abuse their power and harm others as a key function of his job. And I just want to say, we were overjoyed to be able to get Attorney General Bonta to speak today. He, for me, I'll say, is someone who has really unapologetically led as an Asian American on behalf of the diversity of California, and that's not always easy to find. That's not leadership that we see every day. So without further ado, Attorney General.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. How's everybody doing today? Excited to be here with all of you. And thank you, Carolyn, for the very kind introduction. Thank you for allowing me to be part of the summit. Thank you to the fund for everything that you do, bringing us together. It's always inspiring and invigorating to be in a room of folks committed to a common goal, to lifting up all of our diverse communities, people who know that diversity in California is our strength. It's what makes us great. It's our secret sauce. It's the special source of us being the leading state in the nation on so many things. So thank you for coming to celebrate that and also to talk about our pathway forward, the need to show up for one another outside of the API community when anyone faces and suffers from racial injustice, and to be intentional and deliberate about our work. And so I want to tell a little bit about my journey to this space and also some of the work we're doing at the California Department of Justice, and maybe just end with some themes for the future. I am an unapologetic, proud Filipino American. I don't know how to be anything else. It's who I am. It's in my blood, it's in my DNA, it's part of my culture, my identity, and it's a beautiful identity for me. Some of you know I was born in the Philippines. My mom is an immigrant from the Philippines. She was raised in the Philippines as a child. She grew up as a child of war. She grew up in the Philippines during the Japanese occupation. Her family fled to the countryside. The school where she and her family went became a detention center, a prison. And when she came back to visit it, after they returned from the countryside, it was charred, it had been burned, and it was full of bones. And that's how she grew up, in a country at a time of great change, great upheaval, great uncertainty. And the Filipinos at that time, as many of you know, were fighting for democracy and freedom, fighting against tyranny, and fighting for self-determination. And that has been a through line of the Filipino-American community that I'm very proud of, that I connect with most. The fight for rights, for freedom, for self-determination, for democracy, whether against Spain in getting independence from Spain in the early 1800s, or later after World War II, or the Filipinos here in California that helped define the nation-defining farm worker movement. And we're on the front lines, started it when it comes to Larry Itliong and the Delano Grape Strike of 1965 in the Filipino Community Hall in Delano, coming together, putting everything on the line, deciding to do what was right instead of what's easy, and to fight, and to put their jobs on the line. That's why they came, to work and earn money to support themselves. They left their families at home so they could make money and send money back home to them. And they put it all on the line to fight for what was right, and in the process, improved our society, our state, our nation, made it better, made it fairer, made it more just, made it stronger. And since we're in San Francisco, I have to mention the International Hotel and the iconic flashpoint in civil rights history in the API community that meant to so many. To literally take a stand, to literally lock arms around the hotel. My mom was there. She was one of those locking arms. We all know Emil de Guzman was there because of that photo that we all see of him getting pulled out. And protecting what was inside. What was inside? Our beloved elders, our manongs, those who had fought for us and led and were not being treated appropriately. And so that spirit of fighting for justice, fighting for freedom, it's not always told about the Filipino-American community, but I like to tell it because it's what resonates with me. It's what I'm proud of. It's part of the history and legacy that means so much to me, and it's what carries me forward. When I was 2 months old, just 2 months old, my parents needed to make a decision about themselves and their children, my older sister, me, my mom and dad, the four of us. And perhaps the most important decision ever made in my life was made about me, not by me, when I was 2 months old. And they looked out into my future in the Philippines and they asked themselves, will our son, just born, endless possibilities in the right environment, be able to reach his full potential and pursue his dreams? Will he be able to live in a world where there's democracy, where there are rights, where there's freedom, where there's due process, where there's the rule of law? And their answer to that question was no, not here, not now. Maybe, hopefully, sometime in the future. But a dictator was rising to power, martial law was on the verge of being declared, and all those things, democracy, freedom, rights, the rule of law, due process, were gone. And so they brought me here, 2 months old, California, believing what so many of us believe and pursue, and still is great reason to believe in the California dream, that we can come here for opportunity and a better life, and that our dreams can be realized here. And that story has been told thousands of times in thousands of ways over generations, decades. People coming from the four corners of the globe and coming here, California, to America, in pursuit of something special. And many people have realized that. So I'll just say, as California Attorney General, I have realized my California dream. I didn't grow up wanting to be Attorney General. I didn't know what an Attorney General was, but my dream has been to serve at the highest level that I can, to have a role, a say, a voice, influence, ability to make lives better, to make our society fairer, more just, to have the ability to take on those who are powerful but are abusing their power and hurting the little guy. It's really that simple when it comes to why I do what I do, my why. I want the little guy to be treated fairly. The little guy looks like a lot of different things in a lot of different places. Unfortunately, those with power and those who hurt others have found lots of ways to do it against lots of groups of people. So unfortunately, we're very busy at the Department of Justice and in our role, but that is why I do what I do, why I chose to get into public service. I always knew I would, even when I didn't know it consciously. It was always part of who I was from the time I came here. And, I grew up going to rallies and protests and demonstrations. For anyone who was a child of activists, that's what we did. We went with them. We shouted the chants and marched in the rallies and in those protest lines, and we were fighting for something that wasn't necessarily something I could connect with. It was fighting for the future and freedom of a people an ocean away, for them to have democracy, for them not to fear being arrested without due process, imprisoned, tortured, disappeared, killed, and for there to be fairness in my mother's home country. And so that's how I grew up. And before I was, my father and mother got married and had me in the Philippines. My dad was an activist. He was in Berkeley here in 1965. Crossed the bridge, Pacific School of Religion. He went to community college, first in his family to go to a four-year college. Transferred to Berkeley in 1965. And if you're in Berkeley in 1965, you're asking some questions about the future of this country, about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we're going to be better. And he asked those questions. And he had someone across the country who was on the ground organizing in Selma, Alabama, sending him audio cassette tapes of this incredible leader who was talking about something better, a better future, a more fair future, a more just society, and was sending him these audio cassette tapes across the country in the mail. And so it took a little time. Then he had to put it in his cassette player and play it. It was no ability to press on the audio file, but it was Martin Luther King Jr.'s voice. And it called to him, and it called him to action, to go to Selma. He felt, I need to be there now. Something special, something magical is happening. It's an inflection moment in our nation's history. I want to be part of it. So he jumped on a train, on an Amtrak, and was in Selma, Alabama. He was in church with Martin Luther King Jr. He met Stokely Carmichael. He organized for civil rights and voting rights. And so my father, my parents, were part of some of the greatest social justice movements this country's ever known, the state's ever known. I'm proud of that. I forgot to mention that we moved to La Paz when I was young, and my parents worked for the United Farm Workers of America. So it's for Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, and fighting for a fairer contract. And those movements, led by everyday people committed to a common cause, have been what have defined us, what have allowed us to overcome histories of injustice, institutions and systems of injustice, and to be better. And America is, of course, a nation. It's also an idea and an aspiration that we are always in pursuit of, always trying to be better, always trying to be more just, always trying to be fairer. And right now we are in challenging times, facing headwinds. Some people say, Obama used to say this, I connected with it. He said, progress is not linear. It moves in zigs and zags. Sometimes you take steps forward, sometimes you take steps back. We're threatened with some major steps back right now in terms of who we are and what we stand for, where this country is as a nation, our commitment to our founding ideals. And extremism, division, hate are on the rise. And it is not being hidden. It is out in the open, public and transparent. For any of you who are following, I spent the last couple of days focused on that. Focused on 36 human beings, people, who just a number of months ago started journeys in places like Venezuela and Nicaragua to come here, traveled through multiple countries, slept on the street at night, close to one another for their own group safety, missed meals, in hope of fleeing conditions where there is persecution and violence and arriving in a place where there's safety and asylum. And they arrived here. They arrived at Texas, in El Paso. And rather than safety, being greeted with safety, they were met with deceit. They were recruited. They were contacted by people who wanted to make them part of a cheap political stunt and who exploited them and manipulated them and put them on a plane and sent them here. On Friday, 16 arrived in Sacramento. On Monday, 20 more. Governor Ron DeSantis sent them. This is the official policy of the state of Florida. Identify and lure migrants, asylum seekers. They're lawfully seeking asylum status in here. They're non-deportable while they are seeking asylum status. They have just fled conditions of violence and persecution, so now they're here. And so this is how they're treated. It's the official policy of the state of Florida to do this. They spent $22 million on it, $10 million 1 year ago, another 12 this year, to send chartered flights of migrants to places like Martha's Vineyard and Sacramento, California. It's wrong, it's cruel, it's inhumane, it's petty and small, and it's coming from one of the biggest states in the nation as their official policy. It's coming from a governor who wants to be president. And so that's where we are. And so now, what does that require of us? It requires of us to double down on who we are, on our values, on California's values, on what makes us great. And those values include doubling down on the most important asset that there is in California, our people, us, our beautifully diverse us. This is about us having each other's backs, taking care of one another, looking after each other. We know that humanity and compassion and empathy, love for one another is a strength, not a weakness, and that we need more of that across lines, intersectionality, showing up when anyone is treated with injustice, anytime they're treated with injustice. And so that means we need to show up for each other and show that we can get the job done. And we've been doing that at the Department of Justice. You show what you care for by what you fund and what you institutionalize and what you systematize. And so that's why we created the Racial Justice Bureau, to stand up against racial injustice. That's why we created a diversity, equity, and inclusion team within our office to focus on having an office that looks like California. It has not looked like California over the years, I know that. And we're taking steps to change that. That's why we created our Community Awareness, Response, and Engagement team, to get out of these bureaucratic buildings and into communities and sit at circles and at tables with leaders who are doing the work and offering a hand of partnership so that we can scale and expand that work. So let me just end with this as we wrap up. I don't want it to be all doom and gloom, because it's not. But you cannot fix the problem until you face the problem, and we must face the reality of the problem that we are confronting in this nation. And the good news is there's a solution. There's an antidote. And the answer and the antidote is you and us. And we need to be committed to we and us instead of I and me. We need to know that we share a common future. We live in a shared society, and that we need to take care of one another and be there for each other. And that we will rise together or not at all. And there's nothing, and that we must reject the zero-sum fallacy. It is not true that in order for me to succeed, you have to fail. That's false. You can succeed and I can succeed. It's the appropriate, accurate view of abundance. There's enough success to go around. We don't need to take it from each other. So that's item one. And finally, this. You know, because you're in this work, because you do this work, because you're in the trenches every day, that we are not destined to be bystanders and spectators as the future unfolds in front of us, and that we have to accept whatever it is that's predestined or preordained. We know that the opposite is true. We have agency, we have power, we can shape the future. We can bend it and shape it to where it needs to go. We can move it away from injustice and towards justice. We can move it to places that are more fair, that are more inclusive, that create more opportunity and more equity. So we do our work. We believe at DOJ we're at our best when we're working with other leaders, and I'm proud to be in a room with so many great leaders doing great work, and we'll do our part along with all of you. Thank you.